Lovelies, nice to see you again. Well, in fact, I can't see you at all. You can see me though. That was Cannonball Rag, or a kind of bastardized version, as they say in Great Britain. Mixing up a few different ideas. I'll go through some of these and show you how to do them if you want. If you don't actually know how to do the Cannonball Rag main riff, we could go through that to start. So, opening chords of this are over the E, the A, the D and the G. Very easy if you're a bass player, because you can just play all the open strings. Also, if you're doing some single note soloing, you can use those ideas and do some that type of stuff. Anyway, so those are the chords. Well, the first E chord, instead of playing it down here, we're playing it up here, which is, I think, a part of this chord, really. I'll go through the notes from the top down. Pink is on the 7th fret. Then the E, which is second finger, 7th fret with the 3rd finger, and the 2nd finger is fingering the 7th of the the 4th of the chord, which is on the 6th fret. So the bass is doing this kind of chugging backwards and forwards motion. It's not really the kind of Shay Atkins the one, because there's not at the second note, so it's not, you know, this kind of alternating one that goes. It's not that. It's just a Merle Travis, where you very percussive whack on the bottom 2 strings, another very percussive whack on the next 2. You could even not finger them anywhere and you still get the same effect, because it's so muted. So in this context, it'd be like and the 2 top notes are what gives it the melody. Okay, so again. The position on the top 2 stays the same, But this time we're going over an A chord. You might want to get your thumb over the top of that one to play that position. And this time we're going to D9, that is, I think. Probably better to finger the bottom note. Usually we know the B9 from... Oh, sorry, that's the D7th with the 9th added, which is the E. Gives you that. If you move the second finger across to cover the bottom one, then you can... the little melody on the top, still with the top two, we've taken this finger off and we've now gone to these two. So again, very slowly. So there's basically different variations you can put in there. I mean, you can pick other notes out of the chord, no problem. It doesn't have to be a kind of clinical, clean thing. I mean, it's a bit like rockabilly where you can just choose whatever note of the chord and it should work as long as you're holding the chord in the correct position. Okay, and then back to the C. And again on this one, it could be the top two notes you play. Could be the top one and you get the idea, anything goes really on this one. Next, there's this nice figure which sounds like the Peanut Vendor or whatever this tune was called, where you've got you know that one, that's the riff in Viva Las Vegas. Bright light city gonna set my soul. That type of thing. But this time it is over a D7th chord. Again, probably with the bass. No, it's better if you move this finger across, cover the bass, and then you can... I said it's those three notes, but the way it's played usually is to play the first two notes on the B string and then play the top string open. So you hold the chord down, leave the open top string again. You can go back down with the melody, da, 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 or you can just do the da, 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 da. I can't remember what comes after that, hang on. Oh, this does the same figure this time, back over the G chord, so again the same little figure, second string, and usually the top open. So that's actually if you leave the top open, you end up with a G6, because the sixth is the E note, so that's what gives it that. That's the chord that you get in She Loves You by the Beatles. So the whole thing, stick it on it and see what happens. Now here yeah, I can't remember what it did on the original, so I just basically do anything based around that G chord, kind of figures like basically anything, whatever you want in that part. On the Mel Travis one, it did something really simple. It did some kind of chord, but I haven't listened to it for so many years I can't actually remember. There's a turnaround here. Now there's a couple of ways that you can play this. One of them is, oh sorry, now this takes a bit of work. I'm completely out of practice of it, so I'm the first person that should be working it, but it basically begins with a G, and then there's this fantastic, I think it's a diminished chord. Now what you got here, you got to get your thumb over the top. This was a proper Merle Travis chord. Your finger in G bass notes. Then you've got, that's the third and fourth finger, and then on the next strings you've got these, so all the notes together would be this. Okay, so that's interesting chord. And then again we got this same chord, but this time it's moved up one. So C to this horrible diminished chord, back to the normal G, and again, the way to think of this is to just think of it as the bass note raised one in both parts. So you've got this one is moved up one, and this one, the G is moved up one. So another way to play that would have been to go with this chord that I showed you earlier, which is again the diminished. Go from the G, and you've got the seventh, the top of the seventh chord there. That's a like gypsy jazz chord that should be in your repertoire, very standard to go from that one. And then the last two chords of that whole section are the A and you can add some notes on the top, and again it doesn't really matter, so your discretion. So A, I think I play a melody on the top notes using these ones, so you got to, I'd have to do it fast down. Yeah, I'll play this over three chords. So the first one, so you got the B over an A chord, which I think makes it an A ninth. Then you've got the D ninth with a extra note over the top, which makes it either 11th or a 13th. Help me out in the comments, please. And as I explained in another video, in this type of chord progression, because the 2-5-1 is the most common progression in jazz, there's so many different slight variations you can do on this to make it interesting. I repeated this elsewhere, but it's such a good thing that you can go from here, for example, to by just altering one of the notes. So instead of doing the D, for example, you can change the chord to, or so take your 5th chord and just mess it around. You can put anything anywhere. Add a or I don't know, instead of having that one, you could flatten that note and make it that's a pretty horrible chord. Duke Ellington would have probably used that in somewhere, but it resolves to. So this is something you can sit at home and experiment with. As you'll have noticed by now, I spend most of my time trying to encourage people to take chords and conceptual ideas and use them in their own creative way. So that's what it's all about. I'm not into any of this kind of trying to be somebody else. I mean, there's so many possibilities for the guitar. I mean, mathematically there's a million different variations, so mess around with it, do whatever you want with it, mess around with the technique. One other point is that Merle Travis, when he played this, he did everything with just 2 fingers. This was why it was called fingerstyle. It was actually called thumb and fingerstyle. So the whole thing you can do with 2. But you know, why not use all your fingers and do, I don't know. So you can mess around with that. Now, the next section is one that's actually quite difficult to explain, where there's this phrase. It's going to be a tricky one to do slowly. This is the E chord. And this is just another inversion of the A here, where you moved up the bass note. It's not a different chord, it's just and then the same figure here. The picking pattern I'm doing, there's one kind of muted note in there. And again, there's a lot of different variations. You can basically do this one in 20 different ways if you want. I've seen a lot of gypsy jazz players actually play these when they're doing the rhythm part. That type of thing. So you can go up, bring it down, go back up, or you can go up, 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 up. So if you, that I think is a minor passing chord. Leave the first finger down and do, and then you can just experiment with different picking on this. Try it first with one finger. Often there's a muted note, so you can momentarily take this hand off to actually mute something. And you can walk down through the chords. So that's a D, and that's the 5th, the 4th chord, which is a C, to the minor, to A minor, which are the relative minor chords, and back to G. Well, doing that with the same picking principle that you decide to do will give you something like so. And that's another thing which you can just use as a substitution as well. Basically, whatever chord you ever go to, you can always throw in, as long as it's a fast-moving chord sequence. If you're up around 200 beats per minute, so if you're doing rockabilly, swing, that type of thing, you can substitute that in almost anywhere. If you just stay on it and do it for like a minute, it just gets really boring. But just if you're playing a song in A, and as soon as it goes to the E, if you do the or whatever, so that's a one. Take the idea, mess around with it, see what you get, try it with one finger, try it with the two, try and get the flavour that you hear, and then take it out of context and try and put it into your own musical versions that you do with other people. Then I'll put this kind of banjo thing, which I'm not really going to do in detail here, because I've got a lesson coming up very soon where I'm going to teach all the different variation of banjo rolls. The normal banjo roll is a 8-note sequence with a group of 3 notes plus 3 plus 2, not a triplet. So it's 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. So the only thing I can't actually remember what it's like to play slowly here, but I'm doing that idea again. It's all, this section's improvised. Many times with these banjo rolls, you quite often slide into a note and then with the other finger play the same note on a different string. Then I went to the A and did a figure which came out of It's not really a banjo roll in the strictest sense, it's more like a kind of arpeggio. This sort of thing works really well if you take your fingers off to dampen the notes. That type of thing. Again, you can do it forward, backwards, any way you want. Computer's playing tricks on me, so you can go, we can go forward. So that's another thing to kind of mess around with, and when you get into these jam session type situations where it goes into warp factor 9, it's a good riff to just kind of show off a bit on, really. I mean, how much you're saying musically is a different thing, but you know, a bit of flash here and there never goes amiss. What else? So that was the banjo section. Another interesting variation of these is to use this chords and do the banjo stuff as well. So I didn't do this in the solo, but you can, if you take these 3 notes out of the E chord, which after goes to these 3 notes of the A7th chord, and then the first figure again but over D, okay, and then down to G. That you can do with the sort of banjo stuff as well. About to G, or there's this other thing that in some of the Shea Atkins lessons where you do 3 notes. So that's an 8-note sequence, 1 2 3, top 3 strings and 2 to finish. It's not a triplet, it's da 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 da. Again. And so that's very banjo-like feel, very important to get that rumba banjo style feeling. 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2, and all of that is over 8 beats, so it's 2 bars of 4. That's a good way to start the song as well. I did exactly the same thing at the end of the tune over this sequence. If you listen to the Tommy Emmanuel version, he does this at about 500 miles an hour. I'm not sure what kind of amphetamines that guy's on, but so just to show you that part, the D, the E is the first chord, so you've got these two, which are out of the 7th. So the first note is the 4th. So you got this little chord, lovely little chord. We all know E7 there, we know it there, we know it there, etc. But that's a nice little 3-note inversion which leaves the top one open. So when you do the sequence that I just told you about with the 1 2 3, then move it the whole thing up. And then obviously there's the group of 3, the group of 3, and the group of 2. So 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Then this is an interesting A9th chord. We know A9th from being here, or being here, or being here, etc. But there's a good little inversion of this one where you play 1, the E note, and then these two open, so that it's a 4-note chord. Sounds a bit like a pedal steel or something, and then you do the same with those. 1 2 3, move it all up, back down. Again, 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2. Completely even notes, not triplets. If you try and do it triplets, it just doesn't work. So this takes a bit of practice, but there's so many hundreds and hundreds of variations on this, and again you can put it into everything. I put it into like gypsy jazz soloing in it. That works really well. Then the next chord is the same one as we saw before, but it's the D version. Now what's interesting about this chord is that you've got, but this time you've got the E open at the top. Now when we saw the original E chord with that position, we had the E at the top, but this time you've got the D7th with an E. So that adds a nice tension. So up to speed. There's different ways you can finish it. You can 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 flick, for example. That'd be. Something like that. I saw a video of, I think, Tommy Emmanuel doing this, and what he did is he appeared to just move the whole position down each time. Like that, and by just doing that, you get these kind of interesting kind of jazz chords. If you like that sort of stuff, go for it. So lots of different ideas based around that, but the most important thing is to get that timing right with the fingering. 1 2 3 1 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So it's 8 notes in total. Group of 3, and then the 2 at the end. What else? Anything I missed? Yeah, I think that's about it. Oh yeah, there was this phrase that went so that was around the D. Bum, 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 bum. Mute the notes. Then there's a G again, back. I'm not even sure what the bass notes I did down, but anything works on that, etc. That type of thing. Mess around with that a bit. Have a listen to the original. Listen to some different versions. You'll find a load of stuff. And the final phrase was very similar to the turnaround that we saw before. But this time it's up here, so we got the G. How's it going? Now I've forgotten it. Oh, that's it. So the chords. C chord, sharpen the C7th to make it diminished. This is a G7th with the bass added. You can do it with those 2 fingers like that, or you can do it with the 3 fingers. Move the whole thing down 3 frets, and then that A7, A, D, back to G. So again, that part. Ideally, you'll be dampening the bottom notes, letting the melody sing out on the top, which is rule number 1 of all fingerstyle. That's in so many songs, because he's the one and only true original Panther, Pink Panther from head to toe. Great, that's it, I'm done. Happy picking, see you soon.